Hi, everybody. It's Rick tonight with my good partner, Liza Jane Brown. I'm sure you've seen her in different shows here and there, and she'll fit in real well tonight. Since we're talking about society, societal things, um, good to have you with us. Thank you for coming across from YouTube. Tonight is a night where we have found in the past several months that the viewers have had more and more to say. And tonight is a public night. This show has been self-changing. It's been redefining itself for several months now. We're just letting it happen and see what happens. Certainly astrology is always acceptable, but tonight is more of a discussion about society itself. Anyhow, Liza started making some initial notes for today, and I thought they were a really good idea. What got me thinking, we've talked about this a long time now, about the USA's nuts. This is a crazy, crazy place we live in. Now, tonight we started to itemize it by first house, second house, third house, not the chart, just second house, we started talking about the value system of the country. Third house, we started talking about the mentality of the country. Fourth house, we talked about the emotional stability of the people, the citizens. And it was a good idea by Liza, and it really added up to be a good one. If we need to, we will switch across as always and show any chart that we need to for any circumstance. But in general, what I would like tonight to be about is if you want to get things off your chest, fine. If you want to talk about visions that you've had, fine. If you want to talk about movements that you see happening or not happening within the country, this is a time of great change. And I want to start off by going right to Liza and talking about why one might think that the country's crazy. How did we get this way? What do we got to do to get out of it, etc. So I'm going to take this great big weight and hand it to you, honey.
Thanks, sweetie. One of the things that Rick and I were talking about related to this is something that maybe I've even talked about on the show before, but it harkens back to a time when human beings weren't so fragmented and worked together as groups. And Richard Tarnas, the astrologer, and Charles Eisenstein, who is a philosopher and thinker, both talked about this, that when the early stages of when we were humans, we were hunter-gatherers and went as a group and just traveled around and found that anything we needed was along the path, and we shared it. Any food, if we were hunting for animals or picking plants or berries or everything, whatever we needed to survive was along the way. And during those times, the barrier between ourselves as a being and each other and the rest of the world and the universe was very permeable. We were very much a part of the whole universe and very attuned to that. And that seemed to go on for a long time until the development of agriculture. And when we started tying ourselves down to grow plants, we stopped so much being with and part of nature, and it became a time when we had to master nature to grow these crops. And that was kind of the beginning of an evolution or a change in the way we lived our lives. And that was kind of the beginning of some people owning land and, maybe other people being tenants or serfs or slaves to take care of that land. And we've come a long way in so many ways since those times. But when I think of when Rick and I were talking earlier about how fragmented things are, the understanding of what we were way back when I was thinking about how much things have changed. And as we go through talking about the concerns of the 12 houses, we'll see where we end up back with the 12th house and kind of end up realizing we need to get back to so many of the ways we used to do things a long time ago. So,
Yeah, and when you see the US through these filters, you'll see that we're hurting in all 12 ways. We need an absolute revolution in all 12 areas. One of the main reasons this happened, as she said, it's hard to figure that this would happen, but it did. Because once I started growing my food, had my 5 acres, well, I wanted 6 acres if you had 6 acres. Then I wanted 25 acres because you had 24 acres. And you can see how the problem sprung from there. And the idea of sharing, which is certainly represented in the zodiac, how it became less and less. Now, we're going to start with the first house. You'll see what I mean as we go, but you're going to be shocked. Maybe you won't. In my opinion, you're going to be shocked at how we're really deficient in all 12 houses. Take it away. We'll start with house number 1, which is commonly known as the house of the self, the body, your perception.
okay. The first house has to do with how we define ourselves and relate to others and the world at large, our persona. And I was thinking about one of the things that I thought about was a question, which was right now in our society, we're learning a lot about, and maybe some of us are somewhere on a different neuro or gender spectrum. And I'm wondering, because this is one of the wonderful things about now, is that people in so many ways, even though there's a lot of discrimination too, we're able to express ourselves now or come out as ourselves in a way that we really couldn't before, because everything was so, we were just so fixed on certain genders and ways of being and ways of thinking. But now we're aware of all of these different permutations of what we can be. And I'm wondering if we've always been that way, but it's just been that people had to hide or suppress who they really were, or if this is some part of the evolution of humanity that this is more so now than it ever was. So that's a question that I had. Is that something that we want to talk about a little bit?
We may want to. Whole lot of repressing going on. Can you imagine the old days what people had to do? I can't even think of it, because I look at gays and etc. and they just look absolutely normal to me. In the old days, they thought they were nuts or something needed to be fixed, or they're just different types of lesbians, homosexual, heterosexual. They're just the different types of people. And it all seems so natural. But getting the woke generation to be accepted is not a simple matter. So the first house is important. It's not one I think we can go into great detail about yet, because it's the house of identity. And I think our identity is going to show itself more as we get on through the 12 houses. Anybody got comments about the identity suffering and Americans not having sane first houses?
Rick,
Yes.
I just have a question.
Go
When
ahead.
you're talking about first house, are you talking about the first house in the United States chart or
No.
just in general?
No.
Oh, okay.
So we're looking at the average American and zooming in on that person's first house.
Okay, I
The
wasn't sure.
American's first house. The average American's sense of self. Now, I know that I did work years ago trying to determine in my newsletters who amongst the zodiac flows more than others. And I was really surprised to find out that Americans are really pretty uptight. Americans really don't have a strong sense of self. They really care way too much about what the other guy thinks. That's what I found. But I found, let's move on to 2, because I found the second house to be massively important.
You want me to go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The notes that we came up with on the second house talk about, as you know, when in your own horoscope and a person's horoscope, the second house has to do with things that you value. So this relates to our own personal values, but also, the general values in the United States and the world in general. But one of the things that we were talking about is the concept of self-worth. And Rick felt that this is a major issue, that he feels that people are developing more of a sense of self-worth rather than depending upon, your class, your gender, your economic status, your partner, your job, and all of those kinds of things, that in a lot of ways we have much more freedom to express ourselves now than we used to.
Well, one of the things is the old time astrology, people came to you wanted to know when they were going to meet Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. They were obsessed with what did the planets say about meeting the right person. They somehow thought this was up to the choice of the planets. It's not. But what has been found lately in the last 10 years, people have been changing more and more and more. People are still not staying married very long, but people are more aware now of how they're damaging their own self-image, how they're damaging their own sense of self-worth. People are a lot better at feeling stronger and working towards developing their self-worth. So that's really what the second house is about. And when we first did this, I thought it was the number 1 topic in the zodiac. Now I think it's number 2. Talk about number 1 later. But it's really way up there. It's crucial if you think about the health of the country. It all boils down to how each person feels about themselves. Because if you're not feeling good about yourself, what do you think you're going to do to your neighbor? So that's something I'd like to generate some talk amongst you about that sensitive topic of self-worth, because I think that's really what the second house is about. So any comments? Even your dog can throw in some comments if it wants.
I'll say, Rick, I'll say something.
Yeah, dear.
I think you're right on. I'm noticing it, let's say among friends, among maybe myself, the idea of getting divorced, not because I'm angry, because being married wasn't the truth of me, was kind of me living a lie that the public liked. I disrupted everything. And children, I had children get divorced and remarried in a family where there had never in our history been a divorce. And in my family, we had 4. And I thought all of them were very brave and smart. And they were all my children who initiated them. And after a bunch of years of being married, I'm noticing, though, something that's been bothering me. And that is the younger generation, very young. And I feel and see a lot of isolation and loneliness. And
Yes.
I think that they're not developing, we could come up with a lot of reasons, but they're isolated, not just the pandemic, but that didn't help. They're isolated, and they think they don't talk to other people. They don't communicate. They can't hold a conversation, what I would call a conversation. No in-depth responses, always distracted with a screen somewhere. Don't express how they really feel. And I see that as a grandmother because I have 12 grandchildren of every age you could have. So
Yeah, and I can really see it in you too, because you're covered with people all the time. You got this great big authentic smile on your face. You're really enjoying your grandkids and all. You're really you're also smart about lots of things, but you're really living your life, and that's really
Yeah.
admirable. And I don't see many people that are capable.
I noticed that too. I noticed that people greet you with it. This isn't, I'm an exaggerator, just so you understand. I know that, but I'm exaggerate everything. But it just seems like everybody I encounter, their first expressions to me are about their latest problem. Like it's just, I just, or I pass a lot of people in a daily life or on the street. I smile easily, but if someone smiles back at me, it stops me in my tracks because it's so unusual to get a genuine, the same.
Do you remember in the 60s and 70s, you smiled at everybody going down the street? You said hello to everybody.
I did, yeah.
Everybody did.
But
And
I do
you
it.
walked
I
on
do
by,
it.
it was very pleasant.
I do it now, and it puts people off.
Yeah, I know. Good job. Well, thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Catherine. That's really good stuff. Anybody else with thoughts about self-worth being a central issue now? I know that as an astrologer, it's one of the top issues that I work with clients who are unhappy, and we look for turning points in their self-worth. And we'll talk more about this when we get to the 8th house also.
Rick?
Yeah, honey.
I just wanted to say one of the things, I think Rick mentioned this at the beginning, but it's good to remember that when we were talking about all of these issues, and we're already starting to see with just talking about first and second house issues, how all of these issues are intertwined now. You cannot really separate them. And I think earlier times in our civilization, things might have been more compartmentalized, but all of these issues contribute to each other for better or worse. And when we're talking about how we should have self-worth, but we also need to be able to interact in positive ways with other people, that leads to the whole concept of community, and developing a sense of community, which we're going to be talking about later. But we want to hear more what you have to say about the self-worth issue and other second house issues.
Anybody?
I was gonna say, one of the things that came to mind with this is I find that it's like an epidemic here. People find their self-worth and their sense of self, and this goes even back to this first house, with things outside themselves. And it's just so like prevalent with a lot of people, and it's so dangerous because you take if their circumstances are okay, if their money's okay, if their car is okay, if I'm married, if I'm pretty, if I have a boy, it's like, oh my gosh. And it's so it's a
just open up a magazine and look at the advertising.
Oh my gosh. And like Catherine was saying, and then so us as adults, we live like this. And then what do our children see? And I'm watching this younger generation think that there's something wrong with them if they are, they don't have the right color hair.
I don't know how these kids can do it.
It's heartbreaking.
Because we were talking about this. The parents are leaving it up to the schools leaving it up to the churches leaving it up to the parents, and the kids falling through the cracks.
Absolutely.
It's really important stuff because somebody's got to take the lead. Now we need to move on because you're going to start to see the interdependence of all these 12 houses, you might call it, or 12 aspects of humans. Moving to the 3rd house, we're talking about what's in people's minds. What do you think? How do you think? What are you reading? How do you talk? How do you communicate? I tell you, you guys may not know this, some of you younger ones. But I remember in the 60s, if you were sarcastic, they wanted to come after you. If you said something sarcastic, people didn't use it.
Mm-mm.
And it was really daring. And then all of a sudden it caught on and laughing was out and everybody was sarcastic. It just grew and grew and grew. But back in those days, you had more respect for someone else's. You were more,
Mhm.
um,
Don't you think,
Yes.
Rick, that the comedians broke us out of it,
yeah,
like
they roasted
like a
it.
Don Rickles and
Right, that's right.
we thought it was so funny, but then we thought it was
That's right.
awful at the same
It
time.
was awful and it was
And you
fun.
could, Joan Rivers, you
That's
couldn't
right.
stop laughing, but it was, you were embarrassed inside yourself that you were laughing at the negative comments for another person.
It's
Maybe-
one of the biggest problems I've ever seen is ever since that show, The Simpsons started saying, "Don't have a cow, Dad."
Oh, rude, yeah.
And then the kids started talking back to their parents.
Oh,
It was
absolutely.
really, really big. At
I-
that was a turning point.
Yeah,
What else about the third? I'm sure you got notes on everything.
We were talking about, so the third house is, Gemini, so it's, kids and the mind, as Rick was saying, so that led us to talk about the issues with, public schools, and Catherine talked a little bit about this, and talking about people not really being able to communicate clearly with each other, and about saying wasn't attributed totally to COVID and learning online, but I think that it has played a big role in kind of not only the intellectual development, but social development of kids. Because I've had to do a lot of Zoom meetings myself since COVID. And I noticed it's just not the same as sitting in a room with people. You miss the body language,
Right.
the really small nuances of what people are saying that really make a difference. So I think that we're losing that ability to really pay attention to and relate to other people. Again, we turn inward, like we were talking about before, and it becomes more about ourselves because we just don't have the empathy for other people like we used
And
to.
as we keep talking, we'll start to see the interdependence of all these. And you can see right away how the third house is dependent on the second. Because if you don't have a strong sense of self-worth, you're not going to have confident decision making.
Mhm.
You're going to be unsure of yourself when you're speaking.
Mhm.
So the third house, this discussion tonight follows very closely with the book that we wrote, The Exquisite Zodiac, because the first 6 signs are mapped out very clearly in the book to be self-development signs, where we're putting the self together. We're not ready for other people yet. We're putting this self together, and it follows very closely with that. Do you have any other thoughts with my horse throat? Do you have any other thoughts on the third house? Anybody?
Well, I can just make a comment about public education.
Yeah.
I really think that the fact that it's kind of been turned into almost like a factory situation where people are on a conveyor belt and it doesn't have any regard for the individual, how they learn, who they are. You got to fit in, squeeze into this shape, and then next, now you're out of school, and whether you learned how to write or read or think doesn't matter. And I think that it's very expensive to have a better education. We haven't put enough money into it. And I think that's really hurt people a lot. That is just a comment that I have about how we bring kids up and how we've been brought up.
How are their minds being developed? With what?
A lot,
Video games.
so many public schools have cut back on things like civics, art classes, music classes, geography. And well, they're not even teaching cursive writing anymore.
Oh,
And I wonder if that, because your mind can
Yes.
flow when you're writing cursive, and when you're printing in block letters, it's
Mhm.
a much different process.
American history.
One quick story that I heard was that during World War II, one of Winston Churchill's advisors said to him, we're going to have to cut back on the money we're spending on the art museums and the symphony and things like that right now, because we need that money to buy bombers. And Winston Churchill said, then what are we fighting this war for if we have to do that? And that always just impressed me. Yeah, because we're losing our culture. We're losing what makes us civilized people.
Hmm.
Yeah. Somebody wants to say something.
If they want to speak, just unmute yourself, because I'm not.
Former school teacher there.
Yeah, I always have a hard time with the concept that we are cranking out kids like on a conveyor belt. Having spent almost 30 years in public education, that was not my experience. We did, however, have a system where there were state standards to be met. And to prove that you were teaching state standards so that wherever kids went after they had you, they would have a comparable set of information and skills, you had to go through state testing every spring. And unfortunately, the way that, at least in Ohio, the way that schools are funded, which by the way has been declared unconstitutional for decades, but nobody wants to address the issue, schools were rated and funded based upon student performance in these state tests. So students who have special needs can pull down the scores of everybody. Students who aren't in attendance very much can pull down the scores of everybody. Students who don't care to perform on the testing. And unfortunately, we wound up in a position of having to spend several weeks every year teaching basically to that test.
Mhm.
For
So
example,
then
social
why does the United States fall way down the list of education scores compared to Belgium and Japan, etc.?
because at the same time, we've been dumbing it down for decades. I mean, when I was a kid in school, if you were in a class and you had a test that was multiple choice, that was insulting. Did they put me in the dumbbell class? When I taught school, that's all you could give, multiple choice. And there are classes on how to draw up a multiple choice test with one answer being correct, one being similar enough to fool people, one being way off, and
Okay.
another one somewhere in the middle.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good enough with the third. I mean, you gave us some really good points in defense of how we are, and I think that's really a good thing. Well, now is when we're going to really start to see what's happening, because the fourth house is about emotional development. And I don't know, other than Fred Rogers, I don't know who has been a guiding force to teach kids, what do you do when somebody's mad at you?
Mhm.
The teachers aren't taught how to deal with this. The parents, we don't know. They're going to bring down what grandma told them. The church, heaven forbid what the church is telling them. So now we're seeing not only is the third stage having limited success, good and bad, but now you get to the fourth stage, and this is where you're priming children to get ready for their therapist.
Mhm.
So what did you have written down for the fourth?
Well, I think Rick talked about Fred Rogers being a positive role model, and the problem is that kids are have so much access to all kinds of media, and a lot of it is about violence and fighting and not sitting down and solving your problems in a positive way. So it's like you don't have enough, you don't have the one and you have too much of the other influence. The other things that we had talked about are, this goes back to our, our culture being so multidimensional now, so many different ethnic groups and sexual leanings and all of that kind of stuff. And we're noticing now, which, I think most of us here probably think is positive, is that families are very mixed now. And hopefully that's something that can lead to more understanding of each other and acceptance of each other. Other things that we had talked about were we have an opportunity now because of advances in DNA research to find out more about who we are genetically and who our families are. And people seem to have developed a new interest in that, in learning about that and learning about their genealogy and learning where they came from. And perhaps that's positive and help developing, our own sense of self.
I had a reading just 2 days ago with a wonderful woman who came from Italian background, and I mean Italian background, which in other words, mom stands while you eat, the oldest daughter stands with mom while everybody eats. And I was in Italy and they did that. And I said, I'm not eating until you sit down with us. But anyhow, they got the plus and the minus. In the old days, they had the plus of the family unit was very, very strong and everybody was around each other. The flip side was the woman I was reading for had no sense of individuality.
Mm-mm.
She was 72 years old, had never done what she wanted to do.
Mhm.
Why? Because she just felt like, I got to be in the kitchen. I got to get everybody's sandwiches ready. All that made. So we see both sides.
Mhm.
But we see the fourth house is probably one of the most critical houses, because if you don't know how to go about your day when your feelings are hurt, or when someone has said something to you, how do you get past it? How do you get healed? And thus you see the birth of all these games that we play with each other, all these false selves that we bring forth.
Mhm.
And then the need for groups like this to put the pieces back together. So your thoughts on, Linda, let's hear from the college professor. Your thoughts on the emotional development of our children in the normal American standards with the normal institutions that we have. Where are they getting their emotional instruction from?
Well, I think that's a hit or miss proposition. I came from a background where I learned nothing emotionally, and I've spent 40 years in therapy as a result. So all I'm going to say is I don't think things are getting. I don't know that things are worse, at least from my perspective. But I do think it's much more common. I write on a blog, a forum, with a lot of people, men and women who have broken marriages, broken relationships, experienced infidelity, experienced abuse, raising kids, and so on. And there's just a bunch of people on there who try to support one another. And one of the things that strikes me is how many of the people who have their kids in therapy.
Everybody.
They have their kids in therapy. We have two full-time, we have a very small campus. We have two full-time counselors who are busy all the time. And the other thing is that in the best circumstances, and I don't think in the lower socioeconomic realm this is true, but I think once you get into the middle class, it's very true. There are plenty of people who can pick up the slack if the parenting is bad, or and those kinds of things. Kids can come to professors or teachers in small institutions for help. Now, I don't know that this is true on big campuses, and I think that in lower socioeconomic areas, it depends upon who's been willing to go in there and intervene. And like, for example, Charlie Batch in Homestead has a massive operation trying to, teach kids this stuff. And so I think, and I have personally know 3 of my own graduates who that's what they're doing. They're working in the Pittsburgh Public Schools as a resource officer and so on and so forth. So I think that there's a lot of effort, but I don't think it's institutionally directed. I think it's individual people seeing a need and stepping up. And
When I start a reading with somebody, usually I don't have the time to hear a long story about how their mom and dad mistreated them, but I want to hear something because I want to keep the focus on them. So I broke it all down in one question. I find out what sign the parents are they alive? And I asked them about your mom between the ages of 5 and 15, when you were with your mom, how did you feel? They inadvertently start describing their mother to me. So when I asked them, how did you feel when you were with them? And a lot of people just go, and they're blank. They don't know because they've just shut it off a long time ago. And I don't need much more than that. Then I ask the same question about the mother. Now, if I got a client who had a supportive dad and non-supportive mother, at least they had one. If I get a client with 2 parents that didn't listen, 2 parents who were not available, the difference between those people and people who had 2 good parents is just unbelievable.
I mean, that's 100%. That's 100% true. That's 100% true. And people like
I'm almost at the point, and I've told Liza this tonight, I think 1 out of 10 people should rethink about having children. I think 9 out of 10 of them shouldn't.
well, I mean, I knew I
Think about
shouldn't.
the child's possibilities.
I knew I shouldn't because I had no idea how to do it. I mean, if you don't have anybody in front of you showing you how, and I think it's a huge problem.
So we understand that 4 is big. We're going to move on. So thank you. 4 is really big. So we move to 5, and you can see the development of the cosmic soul as we move through, just like the exquisite zodiac shows us. In 5 of the 5th house, it's the ability to express yourself. Play violin, get on stage, but really more it's just your ability to speak for yourself, speak with confidence about you. You're proud of yourself. So what did you find in the 5th area?
Well, I think that in a larger sense, yes, it's once we kind of know ourselves through the 4th house, then we can create the kind of life that we want to have, hopefully, in the 5th. So it's certainly about the arts and being creative in those kinds of ways. But I think just in the little parts of, the parts of our life that make up who we are, the 5th is important. Also, we were talking about how in this day and age, really anybody can be an artist because you can make art, you can take photographs or make art on your cell phone, which is
So 5 is
is
pretty
really cool.
good.
Yeah.
5 is pretty good.
But-
We have a lot of ways to express ourselves.
But just in general, you'll see artists and musicians incorporating all kinds of electronics and new things
Yeah.
in their art, and that's pretty cool.
So 5 is not suffering like the first 4 are. Don't you think?
I agree.
Most of us have ways to express ourselves. I think. And any more comments on 5? Because we got a lot to get into here. Yeah, 6 is really critical. It's really a critical stage of the zodiac, Virgo stage. And the reason it's critical, it's the last of the first 6. And when we wrote that book, we had to spend a lot of time in the very beginning to differentiate the bottom half from the top half without calling the bottom half selfish. So we came up with a term we felt good about. We've had no real flack about it. We came up with the term of self-oriented. They learn from themselves. They learn about themselves. This upper half is other-oriented. Your life is based on how I mix with others. We found that to be pretty acceptable and pretty palatable for people. But the 6 is so important because that's where the young man, the young woman is made. You clean up, you get a tie for your interview, you get your clothes pressed, you get your hair cut because you're going to go meet people. That's a big deal in a zodiac. Going from 6 to 7 is a huge deal. And this is one of the reasons I think that 6, the Virgo sign, which we've talked about so much the last 2 months, it's one of the signs that really has trouble with emotions because they're not taught to have emotions, to own them, be proud of them, and be okay with them. They're taught that emotions are messy things. They have emotional difficulty. They don't know how to emotionally exchange with others for a lot of them. Virgo parents are usually excellent at putting bread on the table, keeping you neat, getting you to work ethic, etc. But it's very common to me to have a lot of clients who have Virgo parents, and they felt like I could never do anything right.
Mhm.
And it's a real tough part of it. So it's a real critical stage, stage 6. I'm not even talking about health, which is the 6th stage too. What did you find in 6?
Well, in addition to into the things that Rick just discussed, we did talk a lot about the general health issues for this country and the world, and healthcare. Certainly, there are a lot of new diseases out there now. It seems like there are a lot of genetic mutations with COVID and other things that we have to try to keep up with. In a positive way, though, there are a lot of new therapies for treating things like through DNA and gene therapy. Also, something which is becoming much less controversial is the idea of using psychedelics for a lot of emotional issues, depression and other things like that, and a lot of fears and trauma that people have experienced, which is very positive. Also using psychedelics at end of life or for people who are facing death with a lot of fear, which we thought is very positive. I'm trying to look at my note here. Oh, Rick was very, Rick pointed out another really important thing is the whole idea of insurance and healthcare, which, makes me think that we should be considering
tied to your self-worth.
yes, but the whole issue of national health care as opposed to insurance companies getting in the middle. And if any of you have had any health problems recently and have had to work with your insurance company, you probably understand why this is a very important issue that's also related to the 6th house. So
6 is very important because it's you getting everything ready to step on stage. Because going on a stage is really what 7 is about. Libra is a very brave sign, as all the cardinal signs are, because it's stepping on stage for the first time. It doesn't know what the applause will be like, if any. It doesn't know how to behave. It's totally dependent. The 7th stage is totally dependent on how well you've put yourself together in the first 6. It's not just the stage of marriage. It's not just the stage of counselor. 7th is your ability to socialize. Socialize is a big deal. I mean, I raised a child who's now 37, 36. And when they were young kids, you try to get these young kids to have a birthday party where they're going to talk to each other or do something together, and you can just forget it. You can just, they're gonna shove a controller down my mouth. We're going to play video games, like it or not.
Yeah.
So because of that, I see what Catherine said clearly before, the lack of social skills
Mhm.
that are so important. And you all know this from being at work. When you're at work, the best people next to you are not always, they're not always the most educated, but they're surely people that know how to socialize.
Mhm.
And that's a real valuable skill.
They're salespeople.
Oh, yeah, the salespeople. It's the front edge of your corporation.
Mhm.
I'm personal with you. I'm personal with you. If you think about, I always think about this. If you think about the people you really admire, people, two or three or four people around you that you just go, wow, and they have really strong social skills.
Mhm.
And they probably had really healthy parents. What do you guys think about 7? Marcia, Claudia, come on. Yeah, Marcia, unmute yourself, dear.
I think a lot of these going through these different periods and growing up, I think play is so essential
Yeah.
for children. Playing just opens up the world of socialization. You know, even if you're playing with an imaginary character,
Yeah.
who is your friend? Charlie is here. Charlie, say hello, whatever. You know, I think that socialization and that play is missing. And so with the video games and all the games, it's artificial.
Mhm.
It doesn't involve a real organic sense of using one's mind, you know, a childlike mind. And I think that act of play is so important, and early education is so important. It's such the foundation for the rest of life.
10-4, I agree with that one.
So,
Because, think about in the 60s and all, we didn't have a lot of toys. We had to play with each other.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think we were healthier in a lot of ways socially in those days. And I think that's what led to a happy hippie 60s generation.
I mean, we played with
Yeah.
we played hopscotch.
Yeah.
We
Over
jumped
and
rope,
Whatever. Right.
played ball. You know, that's what we did.
And that's what
Well,
these kids
when-
these
I
kids
think
getting these different isms.
I was going to say we played house,
We
and
played house. Yeah.
we played house, and I built the house out of leaves. I remember it was
Yeah,
like
Yeah.
Dr. John, Dr. John is a
you know, and
Dr.
then,
John is about half a step from being a principal. What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I was going to chime in on the social aspect. So one of the things that, I was just talking with a friend about is, just like how we've kind of devolved down this path of disconnection from each other. I remember my neighborhood used to be extremely walkable, and you would just walk up to kind of
Mhm.
like the market district area. I'm not talking about Giant Eagle. I'm talking about literally like stores and everything not too far away. And there was a payphone at every corner.
yes,
Like
yeah.
it was like expected on some level you were going to interact with people.
Mhm.
And during the course of my lifetime, I've seen all that go away, and now people are like just kind of doing this, and nobody
Yeah.
talks to each other. They're all on their phones. And,
Yeah.
I think there was a guy. He was a philosopher. I think it's Marcuse or whatever, but it's like the medium is the message.
John, we can't hear you very well.
Mhm.
The medium is the message.
Yeah.
Marcuse, I think. it
Marshall
is.
McLuhan.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a couple of guys that wrote on this stuff though, and it's like you think about the old days, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but you think about like Jefferson and like the founders. They wrote like they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have technology, but they did have letters, and they would just write their thoughts. They had time to reflect and think about things. And now it's all text. It's all like quick thinking, but no like depth. And that's where we are.
Yeah,
as a
when you used to
society.
get a letter from somebody, it was like really special.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I think
Even
it
if they
made
put an ink blob in the corner,
it
whatever.
made different
Yeah.
connections in our brains. And
Yeah,
now
that's
it's just
true.
all video and text. And,
So we
that has-
start to see that if we make improvements in these areas, what force is out there to put it in a neat package and help us assimilate it? What person's out there? What organizations out there to help us assimilate all these things? If you go take a repair crew in to repair houses 1 through 7, 7 repair crews, who's out there to help us integrate it all? There's a lot of work to be done. So when you go from 7, you done with 7? When you go from 7 to 8 is really critical, because 7 is really mislabeled about relationships. Libra is about relationships, yes, and you're learning to relate to others. You're learning to socialize, but you're really largely got your focus on yourself. Am I doing okay at this? Which you have to do. But in 8's a big deal. Scorpio, it's the state where we come together. Now you're starting to think about how we are. Now across the zodiac, at stage 2 was self-worth. Now 8th house is a big deal. Right now it's a big deal with people. The 8th house is, how do I feel about myself when I'm with you?
Mm.
When I'm with you, how do I let you make me feel about myself? Of course, I'm going to say it. Well, Claudia made me feel this way, but she didn't. I made myself feel this way because of a lack of strength in my 8th house, which is my ability to be with others, let them be who they are. But what I'm seeing now as an astrologer, I'm seeing tons of this. People are turning a corner now. People are saying, thank you very much, but I will decide how I feel about myself. You're seeing this everywhere now. It's because of Eris. Thank you very much for your opinion. No thanks. I will decide who I am, how I should feel about myself. This is a big deal. What'd you get on number 8?
That's pretty much.
Okay. She saw pretty much the same thing. Other thoughts, people? On number 8? How about you? Think about your life. Think about it in 10-year chunks and think about how you felt about yourself during those 10-year chunks and how that's changed. And it is changing. And I think one of the things is, I do think it's one of the good things that divorce has brought us. There is more self-honesty when we're going to break up, even though it's an awful thing, because people are not having the sense of self-worth that they want. But this is one of the stages that's really critical, because as we're improving, we've got to be able to be strong as a self, but also while we're with others. And in my research, I found out in the early days, Americans are very weak. They're very, very weak, worrying about what he thought, what mama says, what they think. So this is a new strength of ours. It's just starting. Come on, jump on board. One thin dime. Step up and play. That's what I said on the Jersey Boardwalk.
Rick,
Yeah, dear.
all I can say is that, it's really an interesting combination, because you have to be able to think about, what you feel, and at the same time be open to others and give them to, because if you're like too much always thinking about yourself, you can block.
Getting a lot of static, and
Like, how are you doing, Oh, static. Oh, sorry.
I just hope I don't get thrown out, and then the inmates will run the hospital. Last week.
I was just saying that,
You sound better now. It's better.
Well, because I took these things off.
Yeah.
the thing about getting that deep with yourself is you have to also make space for other people. I mean, it's fine when you're alone, but when you're with other people and you want to go deep like that, you have to show them your interest about wanting to know about them too.
That's
Because
right.
people have a tendency to just go on, and then, like your friend that calls you and tells you everything that's wrong, and then they ask you for 2 minutes, how are you? And then they're hang up the phone.
Yeah.
So
Anita, are
it's
you
a good
here?
thing that we're doing that, but on the other hand, we have to remember how to relate at the same time.
I want to say something I remember from a long time ago. Came from Anita, and she'll be shocked to hear this. But it's something she told me a long time ago. Anita, are you listening? Maybe you're awake. Okay, maybe you're not.
It's asleep.
Anita's mother told her when she was growing up, teenager, if you get too messed up in your head, you get too messed up with trying to figure stuff out, and boy, they don't like me and all that stuff. Anita's mom told her, just quit thinking about yourself for a while and go to work and help somebody else.
True.
And boy, that really stuck with me. And I just thought that was so valuable that she gave her that lesson. And I tried to remember it. So 8th is really important. 7 and 8 are really important. When you go to the 9th stage, here she wants another treat. When you go to the 9th stage and you're now in Sagittarius, now you're into politics, big thinking, philosophy. How do we all think? What'd you get on 9?
Yeah, we were talking about the things that we came up when we were talking about it have to do with things like philosophy, religion, and what's going on in the world today with our traditional religions, especially the scandals with the Catholic Church, and the fact that fewer people are going to traditional churches, while a lot of people are exploring Western people are exploring more things like Buddhism and just meditation, and a lot of inner work that's not considered traditional. Also, the thing came up, the 9th house rules the judicial system. And we have a lot of questions about what's going on in this country with our judicial system, not only with the Supreme Court, although that's a big deal, but really if the judicial system at more local levels are really being fair to people who come under, come up for trial. So those are the kinds of things we were talking about.
If the 3rd house related to the 1st house is about your mind, then the 9th house is about our mind. It's about our philosophy. Well, I'm going to go to France and be an exchange student for 6 months, etc. I want to know how you think. How do you think I think? What are your philosophies, etc. You walk out on the street with a microphone and ask people why they voted for Trump.
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but I don't want to hear the answers.
Mhm.
Or a lot of other people that they vote for. I don't want to hear the answers. I don't hear when people form their philosophies that they're really thinking much about it. I think they're thinking, that's what my dad taught me. That's
Mhm.
how I was brought up. I don't care how you're brought up. What do you think? That's the 9th house. What do you think? Have you thought about it? How does it all fit together? Go ahead, honey.
I was going to say that my few times I have all kinds of friends that I've dared to ask a question. Like
Yeah.
I thought we were having an open discussion, and each time I was shut down because I found that when I said, did you read anything about, I was interested. I really want to know how that mind works, because I'm having a difficult time even wrapping my head around it. And each time I was shut down and told, like I was making a problem by asking the question.
Yeah.
Just by asking the
Well,
question.
you're seeing the negative side of Eris, and that's all there's to it. We're really got to work hard at teaching about Eris, teaching about the negative side, and countering with the positive side. Because the positive side is we will learn to debate each other in a healthy fashion. Everybody's got a voice in a healthy fashion, and no more of this cliquish. I voted for him because I voted for it. There. You know, that kind of third grade attitude. So the ninth house is really critical. Not only does it set your mind straight and sets your philosophy for your country in position, but it prepares you for the next leap, which is into the 10th house, which is the Capricorn house, where you got to take your position in the world. It's the Cancer of the second half of the zodiac. You got to find your position, take your position, lock yourself into your position, and stand your ground. And it's not an easy state to be. But the 10th is very critical. What do you have on 10?
Well, Rick is talking about the 10th as in our individual charts and our reputation and our status as a person in the world. And it has to do a lot with our authority, you know, over ourselves, or, you know, the father figure, those kinds of things. But we were also talking about it in terms of major and powerful institutions that we have in the world, such as banks, big corporations, companies, people who have power, like the billionaires who basically set the prices of oil right now and are making, it's been in the papers and the media, very big profits, while the rest of us are paying a lot of money for gas and other things that those things filter down to. So you know, these are institutions that continue polluting the planet and selling weapons and doing other things that are really detrimental to us as humans, responsible for climate change and starvation and disease. And that's nothing that's recently happened. You know, this all started probably at the beginning of time, people taking advantage over other people, but the whole period of colonialism when, you know, the explorers from Europe started you know, discovering other cultures and taking advantage of them and taking over their own cultures. Those are things that are part of the 10th house.
When you were younger, you had an issue. What is an institution that you used to run to and rely on pretty well that you can't do it now? Is that doctors? I see just about every institution that we have. What Pluto has done to everyone. Do you see one that's, you can't say the same about church, can't say the same about the parents. What am I, you can't say the same about school, plus they're hand strapped. They're not allowed to say anything or touch you. Or your coach. I mean, what have we done? What have we done? We're at this critical stage, and the heavy duty stage is next, 11. But again, I repeat, in all these stages, if we bring Dr. 10 in to fix number 10 and Dr. 7 to fix number 7, who integrates it? What force is there to make it integrate? What hero do we have out there to model ourselves after? There are so many wonderful people in this country that are very inventive, and we're going to do better, but in a lot of ways, we're dancing on the edge. And we're just like that Fool card, number 0 in the tarot. He's dancing on the edge, and he thinks nothing can happen. And we're right on the edge, teetering. So when you get to age 11, no, there she is. She's in Aries, by the way. Can't you tell? She just bangs her head right into you when she wants something. Stage 11 is a wonderful stage. The Aquarian stage, I'm very biased. I just think it's a fabulous stage. It's not as complex or as difficult as the 12th and final stage. But in 11, the personality comes together. It doesn't doubt itself. Yes, it becomes stubborn, but the Aquarians are known for being self-reliant, being tolerant of others, allowing others to be themselves, being good friends. So groups, I think 11 is a big hope of ours. I
Mhm.
think we're going to have to rely a lot on 11 and a lot on Aquarius to get out of it, to get these things repaired. What do you guys think?
Mhm.
What do you guys think about repairing? What tools do we have, Linda? You're in college, you're a professor, you're a thinker, you're a society repairman, repairwoman.
Well, I think part of it is um, um, I think part of it is putting ourselves in a position where we're not repeating the things we've always done in the ways we've always done them.
Mhm.
That like today in class, I'm worried about this one class I'm teaching, and I woke up this morning and said to myself, we're going to spend 1 hour just thinking today. And I went into class and I told them they're revising their papers, and they're like mechanics. It's just like they want to change the oil, and the paper's going to be better. Well, no, because you don't have a thought. There's nothing here to make better. And I just said, I took 10 minutes and I sort of laid something out for them. And I said, you're not going to write anything. You can take notes. You can take all the notes you want. You can do whatever you want to do, but you cannot write on your paper. You have to read, you have to annotate, you have to do blah, 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 but you're not going to write your paper. And they sat for an hour and 10 minutes. And they talked to each other a little bit. They worked, and I went around the room and asked each one, and they all told me things like,
You're a magician. What a magician you are.
well, I mean, like you have, but that's not that teaching where you have to teach to the test. That's the teaching where you're looking
What
at
does a basic Libra do in a zodiac? Teaches people how to think.
well, I mean, and that's and it seems so, we have to get back in schools to having time. Somebody mentioned play, to having time for people to read real things and then think about them. Just they have to have time to have a thought, and then they have to have somebody on the other side of it that cares that they have a thought.
Mhm.
This very nice young woman just was completely lost. And she says, I don't know what to write about. And I said, well, tell me one thing you noticed. And she said, well, because we're writing about what's called public memory. Like, how do people, we start out with the Confederate statues and then we sort of go on from there. And she said, everything that we've read, I haven't really seen so much about people remembering, but people trying to forget. And I said, well, there's your paper. Let's make a list.
Wow, yeah.
Let's think of all the places, these conflicts, these traumas, these issues where people don't want to deal with what's happened. And we had a very long list. I said, oh, you think you can write a paper about this? She said, yeah. And like 5 minutes, and now moving on to the next person. Because what it is taking people seriously and not trying to make them into little mini me's.
Well, let me ask the three educators here. Dr. John, Linda, and Susan, what do you guys think realistically our colleges are going to be like, or our high schools will be like in the next 10 years? Take time to think about it.
Man, I think about it all the time. I think we're due for a major overhaul. And I honestly think the pandemic pointed to what that may look like. It's a thing that we resist. I'm not saying online is the answer, but I do think there's going to be a lot more flexibility. We're very traditional. Like, I mean, we went back as soon as we could. We literally went back to brick and mortar traditional education. And I get, like, I mean, obviously we do thrive off of connection, but I think we're ignoring the benefits that do exist and that did come out of that. And so I think college and probably K-12 education gets to be restructured in some profound way. I'm looking at you,
I
Uranus
think
coming to Gemini too. I think that's a big part of it too, or here around 2025. But we're definitely going towards some big like wholesale structural change that involves, I think, even like a souped up technology approach to learning that we haven't fully adapted yet. But I think when we get there, it's like it's going to blow up a lot. Might put me out of a job too.
can I just say that in my limited experience, it's all about funding. And so if schools are funded totally by the public in that particular community passing levies, then schools are dependent upon reaching the, and meeting the needs of the people voting for the levy. And so if I'm in a community teaching that is all blue collar, funding for an advanced placement program that teaches critical thinking skills and writing skills and focuses on that, even with the context of history, including, as was said before, the reading of, well, I don't know if you said this, but primary source materials and applying them intellectually to solve the problem that is presented in a 5-paragraph form, and not multiple choice. I mean, if you're in a blue collar community, you're looking at that and saying, my kids aren't going to college.
Hmm.
My kids are going to be working in a factory.
Well, Susan, I
They don't
want to
need these
interject.
programs.
I really want to interject. I think, like, I hear all that, and I also think what we're being challenged to do is think about where things are going. There's a lot of Aquarius energy, Uranian energy that's floating around the next several years.
Well,
I don't think it matters whether you send your kids to Bexley or Hudson or Solon or any of these places are very, very wealthy suburbs that can give our kids the very best, or the bluest collar place, or Appalachia. I think what's coming is something that's going to level that. That's going to say I don't care where you live. You're going to have access to this amazing technology that's going to make it easy.
That sounds like Eris. Sounds like Eris.
Yeah,
No,
I think that's coming. I think that's where we're on the
when I
journey.
started teaching in this one district in 1995, I was told that within the next year, every student would have a computer, and it was going to start with at least one computer per classroom. Well, in the 20 years I was in that district, we never got to one computer per classroom, except we got the cast-offs by the computer lab that were half-dead computers. They were computer carcasses. And so there was no using them. And I think when it comes to technology, your big stopping point is, what is it going to cost? I think the direction schools are going to go is more leveling. I think you're going to wind up with college prep being genuinely college prep, and trade technical being the focus for 70 or 80% of the kids.
Oh boy.
Because the fact is, well, not every kid is going to be a brain surgeon. I'm sorry, they're just not.
Well, I agree. I mean, I don't think we're talking past each other. I think we're seeing two different sides of the same thing. I think there is going to be, I see that. We have done this. We did this thing since like the 90s where we said everybody's going to college. That wasn't true, but
Well, coddling has to stop. And it's coddling of parents as well.
Mhm.
And when I sit in an IEP meeting, an individual education plan meeting with special ed teachers and the parents and the kid who is simply not capable of taking notes for various reasons, and yet the parent insists this child is going into medicine, what am I supposed to say? I'm sorry, they're barely capable of getting a D- in history. And this is not an advanced class. This is a general level class. Am I supposed to feed the fantasy that this child is going into medicine?
Okay, well, let's move on to 12 because we're at 11. A lot of good things came up. You have things to add?
I do want to
Good.
say
Yeah.
one thing about 11th house types of things. 11th house is ruled by Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius, and John referenced a lot of Aquarius energy coming up. We do have Pluto, which is going to be entering the sign of Aquarius this spring. And we do have the age of Aquarius coming up at some point. So I think that technology is going to play a major part in our future. And also that sign in that house rule things like collaboration of equals, sisterhood and brotherhood, and people working together, and hopefully renewing communities, which has been a thread through our whole discussion here, community effort and how important that is for all of us. So the 12th house, go ahead, Rick, with the 12th.
The first 11 are about building a person with all the things a person needs to be independent, smart, friendly, active, dynamic, inventive, genius, tolerant. But what the 11th house, the 11th stage doesn't have is the sense of Pisces, which is the sense of selflessness. And having the sense of selflessness is not only the most critical, it's the hardest. And you may not know this, but the original working title of the exquisite zodiac was called Pisces, the ultimate sign. And I didn't feel that people would understand it properly, so we had a lot of reasons to change it to that. The thing about the 12th stage is this: if you don't understand who and what you are in this incarnation, well, what can you do? And if you're being lied to by the church, if you're being fed a lot of dogma about different lies and different fairy tale stories, instead of what I think the 12th house needs to change to is a great big stage of reverence, where you have reverence to whatever you call it, but you don't know how you got here. You can argue all day, but you don't have to glorify it. You don't have to glorify it like the human ego wants it, but you're glad you're here. You're grateful you're here. And when you're grateful you're here, you're grateful that she's here.
Mhm.
And I can't win unless I'm happy for her.
Mhm.
And she can't win unless she's happy for me. It's that simple. And I know the churches all got their thumb up their nose and they're all thinking they got the answers, but they've done a lot of harm
Yes.
to a lot of millions of people. So we got to go back to another drawing board and say, what did Buddha say? What did Krishna say? What did Jesus say? What are the basic foundations? We still have yet to conquer Jesus 101. We still haven't conquered the first lesson. Treat others like you want to be treated.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
So thank God for you people, because I love you people. And thank God for her, because I love her. But I thank God that we're together and we meet every week. I think it's kind of a sanity checkpoint once a week. And last week, but have you know, the YouTube numbers went way up. And that was because we talked about possible explosions during the election. So what we need to be thinking about is, what can we implement that's going to work? How can we speak clearly? But more importantly, we gotta speak up, because a whole lot of people are speaking up that shouldn't be speaking at all.
Mhm.
Your final thoughts on helping this country become sane again, Miss Liza? Um,
That's a big one.
Give me about another
I-
minute.
On a positive note, I mean,
Mhm.
I was actually a poll worker on Tuesday, election day for my precinct. And it was really, believe me, we could go on forever. I could go on forever about my thoughts about what's going on in the world that's scary and negative, and especially politically, but it was an honor to be part of a very nonpartisan political process, registering, making sure people were who they were supposed to be and letting them come in and vote. And it was still happening in our country. And I just wanted to make sure you all know that it was a very positive, a very tiring experience.
Well, let me ask you a really tough question now. Save it for last. This will satisfy John too. Now that we're moving into the Pluto in Aquarius stage, which is coming next, it's coming in the spring. It'll be here 15 years. What do we need to gain from that new Paul that will come across us, that new Aquarian sense that come across us? What do we need to gain to shake our heads and get out of this dark Pluto and Capricorn age?
Who are you asking?
You-
Oh. What do we need to gain? Well,
What we need to gain as we dip our toes into the Aquarian well.
the sense of that we talked about of sisterhood and brotherhood and community and working together. And Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius is very visionary. It's very inventive. It's next to Pisces, so it's a very high-minded sign, and we just need to put all of our energies and our imaginations and our intelligence and our love together to work together.
And
to
if
make
you want to
things
see
better.
an Aquarian get happy, then do something as a group. My God, they just can't believe. Yeah, we did it. We did it.
We
We
did
did
it.
it.
We did it.
They just love this energy
Yeah.
of the group success. They just feel like I want to buy the world a Coke today.
Yeah.
Whatever the song was.
Well, as an Aquarian, I can say that he's right about that. Yeah. Get really high on that experience. Very high.
I think as we tune out tonight, I'd like to give the final word, all these thoughts to Claudia. Claudia's got a good, strong mind. She's in the middle. She's not real young. She's not real old. She's right in the middle. She's in the turning point. She's learning astrology. What are your thoughts, dear?
Well, when you asked that question of Liza, it made me think, what would right this ship? What would get us to that,
Yeah.
to a better point in the world, in society, in our country, with ourselves? And I had the same thought, which was brotherhood, which was the first, treat others as you treat yourself. I'm really hoping to, and this is a little bit slight veering off, is Pluto and Aquarius hopefully will help our environment and help our earth, and know that we are not owners of this earth and we dominate it, but she is here we're together in this. And I'm really hoping that happens, that we kind of go, oh yeah, that's right. We don't use the earth. We cultivate it and nurture her just the way she does for us.
Getting back to what I first talked about when the boundary between humans and the earth was permeable, that we were all part of this.
Yes.
Perfect.
So
Yeah.
bring it full circle. So anyway, brotherhood and just get back to nature.
Everybody, take a great big breath. I don't know what we saw, but I hope tomorrow morning looks a little different.
Yes.
Thank you all for
Thank
coming,
you.
participating.
Thank you.
Something a little bit unusual tonight.
Yes.
We'll be back to
yes.
astrology next week. But thank you all. Thank you, YouTubers, for being with us. See you later.
Bye, Rick.
Night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
Safe.
Bye.